The U.S. slams the brakes on punishing tariffs for automakers temporarily. The hints more pauses are possible as Canada demands to turf the tariffs entirely.
Zero tariffs, and we are not going to budge.
And some tips on how you can prepare your personal finances.
Don't look at what's happened in the last 3 months.
If the U.S. is no longer a reliable ally, how fast Canada needs to ramp up defense spending.
I think we became complacent as Canadians.
American support for Ukraine pushed further in doubt. What else Trump has cut off and what it means on the battlefield. Plus, a ruffling of feathers caught on camera. A battle between a Canada goose and a bald eagle. Who came out on top?
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. The tariff roller coaster is still running. Yesterday, President Trump imposed them on all Canadian goods exported to the U.S. Today, after calls from America's three biggest automakers, Trump gave the auto sector a 30-day reprieve. Canada's Prime Minister called Donald Trump today, too, a day after Justin Trudeau called the trade war dumb. Trudeau's office says they discussed trade and fentanyl. Trump had more to say, posting this. I told Governor Justin Trudeau of Canada that he largely caused the problems we have with them because of his weak border policies. He said that it's gotten better, but I said that's not good enough. The call ended in a somewhat friendly manner. Trudeau has said the claims about fentanyl coming from Canada to the U.S. are bogus, and what Trump really wants to do is collapse the economy so he can annex Canada. We have team coverage tonight from across the country and from the U.S. Mackenzie Gray starts us off in Ottawa. Mackenzie.
A day after starting a trade war with Canada and Mexico, Donna, Donald Trump blinked.
We are going to give a 1-month exemption on any autos coming through USMCA.
The White House pressured into the pause by the heads of Ford, GM, and Stellantis, but the carve-outs might not stop there.
The president is open to hearing about additional exemptions.
The chaotic response from the Americans compounded by a contradiction from the vice president.
I think the president's been very clear here that he wants the tariffs to apply broadly. He doesn't want to have 500 different industries getting 500 different carve-outs. And the way to avoid application of the tariffs is to have your factory and have your facility in the United States of America.
While the U.S. can't get their story straight, the Canadian side is clear. They aren't interested in pauses or carve-outs, a message the Prime Minister shared with Trump, Vance, and Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick in a 50-minute call Wednesday morning.
We're on the same page, zero tariffs, and we are not going to budge. We aren't going to buckle down.
Provinces unveiling their responses.
It's a wonderful order. It's a beautiful order. This order is pulling American booze off the liquor mart shelves.
Manitoba Premier Wab Kinew with a cheeky shot at Trump. Alberta's Daniel Smith with a more serious tone.
Cutting off energy entirely would make Canada the bad guy.
Smith not wanting an export tax on over $115 billion in Alberta oil and gas sent to the U.S., a view shared by Saskatchewan on potash, which is heavily relied on by American farmers.
I'm not supportive of export tariffs. Certainly not at this time.
Despite provincial reservations, it's Ottawa who would implement export taxes on resources.
We haven't put that on the table yet, guys. We kept that in our game, in our cards, as cards that we could potentially play if this would escalate.
Melanie Joly spoke with U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and Finance Minister Dominic LeBlanc also spoke with Lutnick, Donna. But Joly admits there's only one decision maker, Donald Trump.
Mackenzie Gray in Ottawa. Thanks, Mac. The auto sector isn't the only industry complaining this trade war is bad for business, but it is the only industry getting an exemption from the punishing tariffs for now. Jeff Semple is in Michigan.
This is 18 years of being mayor. And
Brian Barnett collects magnets from his travels as mayor of Rochester Hills. But of all the countries he's visited,
my favorite magnet, which of course is this one here.
The Michigan city of 80,000 is just 25 kilometers from Windsor. Almost everyone here works for or with the auto industry.
So much of what we do comes through Canada, number one, and Mexico, number two. Like I said before, you really couldn't pick two worse countries to have a tariff battle with.
The Republican mayor in a state that helped elect Trump was relieved to learn of the month-long auto tariff reprieve. But
there's still, a lack of clarity. And again, the biggest challenge with this is the uncertainty.
It's got people quite a bit paralyzed right now.
This American auto industry rep says it would take years to unwind the Canada-U.S. manufacturing relationship.
We went through the financial crisis, we went through COVID, been through the chip shortage, but nothing like the trade war. The industry can respond to change. It can respond to policy change. It's used to that, but it needs time to make those changes.
Trump says that message was received from the heads of the three major automakers, which resulted in the delay. But there's a catch.
He told them that they should get on it, start investing, start moving, shift production here to the United States of America, where they will pay no tariff. That's the ultimate goal.
While the auto industry reels, other American businesses are embracing Trump's tariffs.
They feel like in the long term, it'll be of benefit to the U.S. as well as to other counterparts.
What do you make of the argument that this is sort of short-term pain for long-term gain?
The tariffs, if maintained for any significant amount of time, will create huge roadblocks that damage the competitiveness of the North American auto industry.
Canada's auto industry and border communities aren't optimistic.
But it doesn't solve anything in 30 days. You're sending them back to the cliff.
Information seems to be changing hour by hour and minute by minute, so it really makes it difficult to try and find a response that meets the moment.
There remains confusion tonight over exactly which vehicles are exempt from the tariffs for the next month or so, and the industry is also bracing for steel and aluminum tariffs set to take effect next week, Donna.
Jeff Semple in Rochester Hills, Michigan. Thanks, Jeff. Tariff is a fancy word for tax, and consumers will be paying it. How you can approach all of this when thinking about your personal finances is what our senior business correspondent, Ann Gaviola, is looking at. Ann.
So, Donna, no one knows how long this trade war will last, but we do know that people can plan for a period of financial instability. So think volatile markets, higher inflation, and an impact on the labor market. Economists and personal finance experts suggest, number one, tightening up your spending. Do you have a home reno or lavish trip that can wait? The goal here is to keep you in the best financial shape to get you through a potential spike in inflation. According to the Retail Council of Canada, you may feel the pinch first at the grocery store on imports from the U.S. So think things like lettuce and berries and orange juice. And number two, if you haven't already, create or maintain a rainy day fund. So this is the equivalent of 6 months worth of living expenses, not 6 months of salary. This is just in case your employment status changes, your hours or your pay take a hit. And the third point relates to your investments. Basically, keep calm and carry on.
I recommend that anyone who's opening their portfolio today or even in the next couple of weeks to zoom out. Don't look at what's happened in the last 3 months or even 6 months. Look at what has happened in the last 15 to 20 years.
We saw Wall Street rally today after 2 days of selling off, and people can brace for market turbulence as we see policy shifting daily and in some cases hourly. Donna?
And Gaviola, thank you. In an address to Congress last night, President Trump laid out his vision to remake U.S. policy on everything from the military to foreign aid, immigration, and trade. He didn't repeat his line about Canada becoming the 51st state, but he did double down on expanding U.S. territory by acquiring Greenland and the Panama Canal. As Heather Yurix-West explains, it appears those wild ideas are actually part of a plan.
In Greenland and Canada, there is a renewed sense of patriotism and defiance, inspired by the persistent overtures of a U.S. president eager to expand.
We need Greenland for national security and even international security, and I think we're going to get it. One way or the other, we're going to get it.
The president, he feels strongly that it would be very beneficial for the Canadian people to be the 51st state of the United States. They wouldn't be paying for these tariffs.
The aggression ramped up this week, imposing punishing tariffs on allies.
You don't have the cards right now.
Along with the administration's clear reversal on Russia, it's a seismic shift in U.S. foreign policy.
The new system that we are seeing rapidly changing in the last 5 weeks or so, it's almost like a fealty-based system that's very much about what the U.S. can get from it, as opposed to necessarily the U.S. leading with particular principles in mind.
From Canada and Greenland, the U.S. could access vast lands of critical minerals and energy, vital to compete with powers like China. Like the Panama Canal, too, Canada and Greenland also offer gateways to important strategic positions for commerce and defense.
The United States is now seeing the world in multipolar terms.
where great power competition rules. It's transactional. Canada needs to realise the United States is playing hardball here, and that if they don't want to get run over, they have to demonstrate why they shouldn't be.
Greenlanders vote next week in an election that could see the territory move toward independence from Denmark as an opportunistic U.S. president asks people there and around the world to reconsider old alliances. Donna?
Heather Yurix West in Washington, thanks. China, also hit by U.S. tariffs on its exports, has warned it is ready for a fight. China's embassy posted this: if war is what the U.S. wants, be it a tariff war, a trade war, or any other type of war, we're ready to fight till the end. China also imposed up to 15% tariffs on American farm products in retaliation for Trump's tariffs, and it's boosting defense spending by 7.2% this year to strengthen its preparedness for war, saying changes unseen in a century are unfolding across the world at a faster pace. Defense spending in Canada and how to increase it hasn't been a hot political topic for a long time. But with so much uncertainty in the world, and if there comes a point we can no longer rely on the U.S. as an ally, where does that leave us? Mercedes Stephenson has a reality check.
Throughout history, Canadian and American forces have fought side by side to defeat tyranny and advance the cause of freedom.
One of the United States' top generals delivered a much-anticipated speech in Ottawa Wednesday, at a time when the Canadian defence community is deeply alarmed about the future of Canada-U.S. military relations.
The United States and Canada share the longest land border on Earth, but our connection goes far beyond geography. Shared history, values, and interests inseparably link our two nations.
Reassuring words from the NORAD commander, but the concern about NATO and NORAD, the cornerstones of Canadian national security, remain.
Absolutely shocking to see the U.S. president saying nice things about the Kremlin and President Putin, and basically in public repeatedly crapping on his allies.
Not to mention the open speculation about annexing Canada. NATO was founded to counter the Russian threat. It has been critical to Canada's international operations. From peacekeeping in the Balkans to the war in Afghanistan, the fight against ISIS in Iraq, and Canada's current commitment in Latvia. NORAD was designed to defend the North American continent. Recently, Canadian and American fighter jets commanded by a Canadian general met and pushed back a joint patrol of Russian and Chinese aircraft attempting to enter the Arctic.
The response that was met was a fully integrated response that has been decades in the making.
So what happens if the Americans pull their assets out?
The idea that we could ever rebuild under Canadian budgets what we have right now alongside Americans at NORAD is not doable financially.
Defense Minister Bill Blair acknowledged Canada has not done enough.
The current circumstances have told us perhaps we have been overly reliant on others for too long. And now is the time that we need to stand together on our own feet and get the job done.
Donna, there's no question that Canada must spend more on national defense, but the question is where, if we can't necessarily assume that the U.S. will stand behind its commitments.
Mercedes Stephenson in Ottawa, thanks. More than 100 people have been arrested in an RCMP operation targeting online child sexual exploitation. Police from across Canada say they were able to identify and safeguard 37 young victims last month.
By working with partners in multiple jurisdictions, we were able to significantly extend our child protection efforts. We were able to share expertise and resources and tap into specialists in the field.
More than 1,000 electronic devices were seized and 300 charges laid. Police say there are still hundreds of investigations ongoing. The U.S. pulls more support for Ukraine coming up, the pressure piling up on Ukraine to strike a peace deal with Russia. French President Emmanuel Macron addressed his nation tonight in what he calls a new era of uncertainty. Macron says U.S. military support is no longer guaranteed, that Russia represents a real threat to Europe's security, and France must be ready. He says he plans to host a meeting of European army chiefs next week. France, one of Western Europe's two nuclear powers, is also open to discussing extending the French nuclear umbrella to include European partners. And Macron pledged to invest more in defense, which includes continued support for Ukraine. A day after the U.S. suspended military aid to Ukraine, it has now pulled the plug on intelligence support as well. President Trump is turning up the heat on the Ukrainian president, trying to force him into negotiating a peace deal with Russia. Redmond Shannon looks at what it means for Ukrainian troops on the battlefield.
The aftermath of a deadly Russian attack on Odessa. Russian drones drop on us like flies, says this Ukrainian woman, picking up the remains of one of them. To fend off air attacks and to fight Russia on the battlefield, Ukraine needs military hardware. But on Tuesday, the US suspended the supply of that. Kyiv relies on US intelligence too, which Washington now says it has also stopped.
We have taken a step back and are pausing and reviewing all aspects of this relationship.
It's difficult to overestimate the importance of US intelligence for us, says this Ukrainian MP.
The big, what we call capital assets capabilities, the big satellites, are American.
This intelligence expert says if Washington's close allies like Canada and the UK come under political pressure to also stop sharing with Ukraine, they could look for workarounds. He thinks some US intelligence operatives may even do the same.
It's the professionals and the practitioners who've been fighting this fight against the Russia threat for a decade, and more than a decade now, may see ways to drag their heels.
US National Security Advisor Mike Waltz says Donald Trump will consider lifting these pauses if peace negotiations begin and other measures are taken. That could be a reference to the Ukraine minerals deal. Volodymyr Zelenskyy says he hopes to see what he calls results in the next week. Donna?
Redmond Shannon in London. Thanks, Redmond. Ahead, why the U.S. wants Canada's critical minerals. It's hard to know the real reason behind President Trump's punishing tariffs, but it is clear he's taking an aggressive approach to accumulating critical minerals. Canada has a lot of them, and they're a vital resource. As Taria Isri explains, that's what makes Trump's notion of annexing Canada a real threat.
It's been called the gold rush of the 21st century.
I will also take historic action to dramatically expand production of critical minerals.
He's also looking outside the U.S. for these key ingredients needed for industries of the future, including artificial intelligence, defense technology, and nuclear power.
Our country doesn't have much raw earth.
Canada does.
Canada has really strategic reserves of minerals that the U.S. doesn't have a lot of. Canada actually supplies the majority of our nickel.
Much of that nickel is found in Ontario's Sudbury Basin and used for steel and electronics. In Saskatchewan, there are vast deposits of potash needed for fertilizer and large quantities of lithium in Quebec's James Bay region, which powers electric vehicle batteries.
By 2050, we will need 42 times the amount of lithium that we use today.
Jose W. Fernandez helped craft the Biden administration's critical minerals strategy.
No one's looking to establish a colonial relationship.
Trump's rhetoric is increasingly aggressive towards countries rich in critical minerals like Ukraine, Greenland, and Canada.
It is not simply the Americans that want access to Canada's critical minerals. It is the Japanese, it is the Europeans, it is the South Koreans. These developments.
At one of the largest mining conferences in Toronto, the push is to diversify markets and shore up development.
It's just sitting there waiting for us to mine, and we have to take advantage of this. This is our time.
China controls more than 60% of the world's critical minerals production. Security experts say if North American supply chains are disrupted, it will be Beijing that benefits the most. Donna?
All right, Taria Isri in Montreal. Thanks. National pride ramped up. Next, Canadians hit back against Trump's trade war. Canadians have always had a lot of national pride, but it's usually a quiet, understated confidence. That is changing now. The insulting, aggressive tone of the U.S. president has awakened something in us, and we're not afraid to show it. Eric Sorensen looks at how the country is coming together.
Hey.
Remember this guy in the old Molson's ad showing off rarely displayed Canadian pride?
I can proudly sew my country's flag on my backpack.
Well, he's back 25 years later with a spoof that seems even more timely.
That artificially drawn line they keep talking about, not artificial, and it's not on a map. It's right here.
Donald Trump's tariffs have set off a tsunami of Canadian patriotism.
I appreciate it so much.
Comedian Mike Myers on Saturday Night Live flexing his Canadian elbows up, a reminder of the original Mr. Elbows, Gordie Howe. Canadian pride surged in that recent hockey series. More flags went up on Flag Day. And a Burlington photographer posted images of an American bald eagle attacking a Canadian goose, and the goose holding its own.
At the end of 20 minutes, the bald eagle just gave up and took off.
Many plan to travel around Canada this year rather than south of the border.
We don't plan to cross the border, that's for sure. You know, it's a question of solidarity for our people here.
Speaking of solidarity, the Great British Shop in Halifax has turned 25% tariffs into 25% off to support local producers.
I love coming in here anyway, so having a sale is actually better, and I love it that we're poking back at the good old USA. Yes.
Political leaders are catching the wave.
Quebec, Manitoba, BC, we all have to act in unison.
One longtime MP was in Washington Tuesday, and he had a blunt message for the Americans.
You poke me in the eye, then I poke you in the eye, and then back and forth, and we both end up blind.
That's right, like cutting off your nose to spite your face, because we are joined at the hip, and rather than chewing your leg off, it's better to shake hands. But keep in mind, we're still moving forward with elbows up. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
Elbows up. And that is Global National for this Wednesday. I'm Donna Friesen. Tonight's Your Canada is our flag on Sulphur Mountain in Banff National Park, Alberta. Keep sending us your images of Canadian pride. You can email them to globalnational@globalnews.ca. And thanks for watching. Hope to see you here again tomorrow. Bye-bye.